As I got another rhyme, another rhythm for y'all to listen. I'm never quitting on my mission. I'ma roll with what I'm giving. Got some ambition, this new edition, filling positions. Looking at the void in myself and feeling what's missing. Better watch the way you going, better go in the right direction. In the moment you stressing, but you gon' be counting blessings. And I know that for certain. Keep on working, open curtains, haters swerving, cause they ain't ready for your final version. Whoa. I'm never gonna give up. Fall down, I just gotta get up, yeah. Cause this is my road.
You're listening to the Tom Ficklin Show on WNHH LP 103.5 FM, your home for community radio.
Harry, good morning, and good morning to everyone. And Harry, thank you for that intro. We really have the pleasure today to have Maritza Bond on the show with us, Director of Health for the City of New Haven Health Department. And we were just talking before we came on air. Obviously, we're going to talk about the current really global critical situation where all of us need to, in fact, I think Maritza just everyone needs to deputize themselves and just understand that they can be a public health warrior in their daily activity, their nightly activity, their 24/7, 365 activity. But we're also kind of talking about what will public health look like in 20, 30 years? And Maritza's been involved in this, I'll say, movement and passion. And it's been a passion of hers, not necessarily always a struggle because she still gets a paycheck. Let's keep that in mind, but it's a commitment as a career to kind of be involved with health for over 2 decades. And we'll talk about that a little bit. But Maritza, let's just kind of start with the update because I was looking at the website this morning and we have some upcoming, meaning the public health department, have some upcoming activities. And I say the public health department, just not you, because although you're the director, I think people think that if you work for the city, if you have a responsibility, all of that burden has to fall on your particular shoulders. And that's a misnomer. Yes, you're the director of public health, but all of us have to feel in some way that we are working for you. Now, you're not putting money in our pocket, but you're saving our life. You're helping us go to a store and the food will be good. You're helping us swim at Lighthouse and the water will be safe. You're helping us go to a vendor and know that vendor is giving you healthy food, but I digress. But give us a little update because I noticed some really exciting events taking place to really help people understand that yes, we're going to solve and abolish COVID, but also we're going to have some fun, educate, and really communicate to the future generations what it means to have a healthy society, not only here in the States but also globally.
Thank you first and foremost for the invitation. I've known you for many, many years. And so you sort of seen my career path in almost the 2 decades. And so it's such an honor to be part of the show today. And, you were on my to-do list to get on your show. I think we talked about it briefly when I first joined the health department here in New Haven almost 18 months ago. And then the pandemic really, really hit hard. And so thank you for having me today. And yes, as the health director, oftentimes being a health official, I have to make tough decisions. Ultimately, every decision that is made is for the betterment of the community. Yeah. And my motto is, it starts with the community and ends with the community. And having been raised in Fairhaven, I'm a native of New Haven. I was born in Brooklyn, but I was raised in New Haven. I went through the school systems in the city of New Haven, as well as Connecticut colleges. So I'm really a homegrown Connecticut person. And, it is my career path, but it's something that I'm passionate about because ultimately it impacts our health. So everything that we do can impact us. And so as a community member, when I was young, I witnessed a lot of the social issues that our community were faced with, right? And then this pandemic sort of brought a lot of things to the surface. We saw the violence increase, all of the different social issues that are impacting our community. And in order for us to really get to making a difference, I truly believe that we all have a responsibility because it all starts with ourselves.
And also, if I can, you mentioned you're being homegrown. I think did you graduate from Wilbur Cross?
I'm class of 95. I am a governor.
Throw that in. I mean, come on.
Yes, I was actually the commencement speaker this year, and it was such an honor. It was our 25th year anniversary of graduating, and I was invited to be one of the commencement speaker for the second half of the graduation.
Well, make a note because I won't say how old I turned this past year, but Around from 45 minutes from now, let's talk about that. There's a football game tonight. Wilbur Cross is playing, I think, Xavier out of Middletown at the Hill House at the what we call it the Hill House football field, and that's these games are public health issues. Just
Yeah, I get to work. So every sector you can think of, I get to help make sure that everything is safely reopened. And so, in addition to making sure that safe policies are in place for our schools, I work very closely with the athletic director to making sure that we're safely having games and practices. And so I'm very proud of all of the coaches. Shout out to all of the coaches. And Reggie from Hill House, we often joke around because I'm a governor first, right?
Yeah.
And our Hill House principal is a governor graduate. So I told him
okay.
he's a traitor. No, I'm just kidding. So, they're doing a phenomenal job in instituting safe policies. And so I am confident that tonight's game is going to be with that in mind.
Absolutely. So tease us a little, not necessarily tease us, but share some of the upcoming events that the department is up to, because in the past, some people might have known who the director of public health was, and some people might not, but it seems to me nationwide, if you're director of health in any municipality or town, you're well known like never before.
I know, right?
But it seems to me with the activities, there's something I think in the West Rock area, then there's something with the library, just to kind of illustrate how you're communicating and disseminating what a healthy community means, not just from getting a vaccination, but just really participate, but really from a family participation standpoint.
Yeah, it's important. So yes, health directors, in essence, oftentimes are the behind the scene heroes. Except my role, I feel like when you're a public health director, you need to make sure that the public knows what we're doing. And so when I was the prior health director in Bridgeport, from those stations, from Fairfield County on, I always wanted the community to be involved. So I was very vocal and public on that side. And when I came to New Haven, obviously the pandemic sort of heightened it because we are responding to a public health crisis. And one of the things that we wanted to do when we responded to this pandemic, and the reason why the city of New Haven, in comparison to other urban cities, although I love my other urban city directors, we had the lowest positivity rate, we have the highest vaccination rate, is because we're working closely with community leaders because we want to make sure that we're in the community. So when there was no access to testing, we put testing in the community. We were the first to do walk-up testing sites because we wanted people to be able to have access to testing. When we just launched our vaccine efforts, we are literally partnering with all the vaccine providers and making sure that we're assessing where the needs are and working with community leaders to make sure that access to vaccines, not only access to vaccines, but education, right? Because one of the things that's important is that people have the autonomy to choose. So I want to make sure that I'm clear about that, because oftentimes people do see me as the regulator, and I do not want, that's probably the worst part of my job when I'm regulating, okay? Ultimately, when I do regulate and I'm coming to you, it means that you've already received multiple warnings before I have to shut you down. And it's for the safety of the people. I'm thinking about the betterment of the larger population, although I do support small businesses and I want them to thrive, but we need to be responsible in that. So we did the same thing with vaccines. We want to make sure that our community understands that you have the autonomy to choose. If you choose that vaccines are not what you want at this moment, that you have the proper tools and resources to make an educated decision. Because I want to have a clean conscience that we've done everything possible with our community leaders in mind to educate first and then choose, and ultimately be safe when you make that choice.
That's right. So do you have your calendar in front of you? I just wanted you to give a shout out.
I don't, but there's so many events happening this weekend. I can pull it up, but there's so many events happening this weekend. So what I would urge you to do is go to our website, because we're going to be everywhere this weekend. We have multiple sites this weekend, and I want to make sure that I don't give you the wrong information. But do you want to highlight one of them?
Well, I know you have an event. It's a rock. It's in the West Rock area. And I know you
Yes.
have an event with the New Haven
So
Library.
we have a West Rock youth event. And we are partnering with our older in that area. It's called Rock the Vax. This is part of our youth vaccine campaign. And so we're going to be at the Shack, 3033 Valley Street in New Haven from 12 to 4. You don't need insurance. You don't need your identification. And we are encouraging youth to come out. That's an event that's already happening. And we were able to partner with Alder Honda Smith on that. So thank you to our local alders who also have been instrumental. We have URU and other partners also going to be there on site to support. And I will be stopping by as well as I try to stop by all of the events. But really, this is part of our youth vaccine campaign because, as you know, we are now have age eligible of 12 and up. And we want to make sure that since school just started, that we are providing the vaccines to our youth so that we can keep our schools open.
As you were chatting about the youth initiative and your community involvement, it seems to me that on one level, your department and the city is daily attempting, and I would say very successful to share correct information, make tools and options available for people to get vaccinated, to know what the pros and cons are. But also, it seems to me that you get a lot of daily information from the CDC and other places that sometimes that you have to incorporate into your strategy tomorrow that the public might not even know about. Talk about that kind of stress, or how to be nimble in terms of policy versus practical implementation.
Yeah, and so everything that we do has to be based on science and data. And so everything that I am driven to, when I make a policy change, it certainly has to do with making sure that I have the proper information. So staying up to date, consulting with my medical directors and infectious disease team is vital. And then most importantly, with our risk communication committee, we created a risk communication committee that is comprised of many different stakeholders within the city in developing health literacy information. So it's not only is, okay, we have now CDC recommendations have changed. How do we communicate that with the public? How do we get it out? One of those avenues is being on radio interviews such as yours, where you're connected to the community and making sure that the changes are appropriate, because they also need to be easily understood. Yes. There's a lot of misinformation out there. Our anti-vaccinators are definitely loud and on social media platforms misleading the public. And so we are working against that as well. And so we work really hard and diligently with our vaccine partners, because what we know as a health official is I don't have to often lead an effort, but I want to make sure that I'm the convener of our partners so that we are using our resources effectively.
Indeed, and that's what I like about the community rallying cry, and the community building the community cohesion and building community coalitions. Because I think I'm not sure. Well, I said I wasn't going to say how old I am, so that means I can't ask you how old you are. But let's say that 50 years from now,
it's all good. It's probably public information anyway.
In 50 years, there still could be infectious diseases. I mean, in spite of artificial intelligence and other medical discoveries, we still might be dealing with what health means 50 years, 100 years from now. And for folks to realize that let's not consider this crisis to be something that we can also view to be an opportunity for our generational prosperity, our generational understanding. Because infectious diseases, as you know, at some point might still be around in spite of the great.
It continues to evolve, and it will continue to change, and those shifts, right? And how do we shift to address public health trends that are impacting the community? And I think within Black and Brown community members, and being a woman of color myself, we have to think about the mistrust. And the reality is that there's been some historical issues that created mistrust in the community. And so how do we overcome these hurdles to ensuring that we can build that trust and bridge that between the communities, so that we can be as healthy as we can possibly be.
And let's just shift for a second and give you a chance to, because you referenced your being in Bridgeport, city of Bridgeport, and also in the New London area, and also you mentioned Connecticut College.
I did my undergrad at Southern. I did my graduate at UConn. I'm a UConn alumni.
Okay, so you got a few. They got a few alumni groups to pay for.
And a little bit of Yale Divinity, yeah.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Fascinating. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, let's shift to talk to us about the responsibility for saving the world is not totally on your tall shoulders. I'll just throw in that little comment. In spite of your being what, 5'3" or something. But
yeah. We're talking about my height now. Yeah, I'm petite and fabulous. I'm just kidding.
petite and fabulous. I like. Okay, all right. And so talk to me about the Yale Divinity connection, because I think when you mention anti-vaxxers, sometimes some people are in the sociology camp or the political camp or the activist camp or the church camp or the just how can I get a
I'm a public official, so I'm not supposed to like talk about my religious beliefs. I'm very spiritual, and I definitely feel that that there's an opportunity between different faith religions, and public health to come together. And I think the pandemic has done that. It has united us in a different way. First and foremost, I often say that this is my public ministry. And so I feel like this is my calling. So everyone in different walks of lives have different callings, and this has been my public ministry. And I always feel I have a responsibility to respond to certain things. And so being able to come back home to my hometown at a time that I had to respond to a pandemic was very timely, and the universe sort of designated that. And we have had the opportunity to work with so many different faith leaders, and we continue to do so now because we know that faith leaders also play a significant role on ensuring, because they are trusted messengers. They are one particular group of trusted messengers that can ensure that the right message gets to the right people.
Excellent. And there's so many articles. Well, historically there have always been a lot of articles talking about the connection between faith and science.
Absolutely.
It seems to me in the last 2 years, it's even been an exponential increase on people looking at the parallels, if not in fact, the words faith and science, we might even merge a few years from now.
I hope so. I think there is no separation, and I think we really need to consider that everything is interlinked with each other. And as humans, we're all interlinked with each other in some way, shape, or form. And it's great to have differences. I think that's what makes us a great society. But really, there shouldn't be a separation, right? Health matters in every level, regardless of race, ethnic, age, social, economic status, because guess what? This pandemic doesn't care about that. It doesn't care if you're rich, doesn't care what your political status is. It will come for you. And so we all have to come together and address it, especially now that we're dealing with something around violence. We as a society need to invest into reducing crime in our city. And, that is a public health epidemic. And it was in my prior role in the city of Bridgeport, and they've done a lot of work to reduce crime. And now we as a community need to come together and reduce crime in our city, because it's not just the government's responsibility. It's not the government's responsibility. It is all of us as a community's responsibility, even addressing this pandemic. And so it's really vital for us to not use the separation. It's not the church responsibility only to get people to a certain journey. It's not the healthcare system only. It's not the police system only. So we have to figure out, how do we work together as systems and entities to really create the change that we need to.
Excellent. And this might sound kind of blasé and sarcastic, but it just dawned on me last week, although I've had the pleasure of doing a few shows, really more than a few shows pertaining to health. But correct me if I'm wrong, Madam Director, but one human, I catch COVID from another person. Right? I don't catch it from the tree or from the butterfly or from the auto emissions or from McDonald's. I mean, I get it from another person. I mean, so you mentioned us being interconnected. I think things that people have just lost track of that basic fact. This is
and the people that are anti-mask, and it's unfortunate when people lack knowledge, right? It's like, we know that masks has been instrumental in reducing the risk of exposure, especially if we're spending a lot of time in close proximity in social gatherings. wear a mask. Like, how is that a violation of your constitutional right? So when you have all these anti-mask individuals running around the state, they're not even from certain cities. So like, I'll give you an example of what happened in Cheshire. So that group, they're not even from Cheshire. They were from Naugatuck, like a whole different town, coming to somebody else's city, and not using sound, like scientific sound information is unfortunate. And what we have to remember is that there are mitigation strategies that can reduce and can protect you. And the two things are wear a mask and get vaccinated. We do know that there's a group of people that are just not able to get vaccinated. And we need to protect others as well as ourselves. So when you're dealing with people with immunocompromised situations, don't be, if you're going to decide not to get vaccinated, can you not go around them? Because you're really exposing them at that point. And what we noticed is that oftentimes we have people with chronic conditions, losing their lives because somebody else is being irresponsible. And that's what hurts me the most is we, at this point in 2021, we know we have an FDA approved vaccine. We know what works. We shouldn't be losing lives over this.
And if I could, Maritza, and I really appreciate your being so clear about that. It was, I think I saw the article in the New Haven Independent. You've also had family members affected by COVID. Yes,
yeah, I have. So it's insane, right? So here I was trying to create an infrastructure early in the pandemic, which was around March of 2020. And, one of the first few family members that contracted COVID was my mom, and she lives in Brooklyn, New York. And I could not get to her. And I think, so in the midst of trying to, bear the weight on my shoulders, because regardless of what, I still felt like we as a collective had a grave responsibility to ensure our public was going to be safe. And in the same time, in the same token, I was battling, first it was my mom, and then it was my grandmother who was in a nursing home. And we know what happened at nursing homes. And so personally, I was being impacted. And so to hear individuals sort of be dismissive about this pandemic, it was personal to me. And so that's when you see my passion come out, it's not coming out because I'm trying to push an agenda. It's because my family personally almost lost their lives because of this pandemic. And to see individuals and debate individuals that are educated oftentimes. So I'm not even talking about individuals that do not have education. It was disheartening because I'm like, and what I've noticed, individuals that oftentimes challenge me have not yet been personally impacted. And when they are personally impacted, oftentimes it's too late.
We have a good 40 or so minutes, 35 minutes remaining. Let's shift a little bit, but I want to still stay within the public health arena. And what I mean is, I think sometimes history, I'm trying to use a word, actually, her story, just as often as his story. But there was a time when smoking was allowed indoors, right? I mean, there's reasons that after it took too long, I think, for people to understand that we can prevent lung cancer by not banning smoking, but making it expensive, and also selected places you smoke and places that you cannot. But public health, again, there's a reason that we have this word, this structure, this initiative called public health.
Yeah, our tagline, and I love my tagline, and I'm so corny for this. I'm like cliche about it, but it's the easiest way that I can describe public health is our mission is to promote, prevent, and protect. And I'm always on Twitter. That's like the only sort of social media outlet that I have in LinkedIn. I always use that tagline because that ultimately that's the easiest way to describe it. And smoking is a great example because we quickly realize people are dying, getting cancer. How do we protect people, and how do we put things in infrastructures in place to protect the health of the people? I think also what I want to bring up is the fact that most of us are vaccinated with all these other diseases that we were able to eradicate because of herd immunity, right?
Yeah.
So because our generation never witnessed that, we often forget that there are all these other vaccines that are protecting us now. And the only way you get that is through herd immunity. And I think the smoking issue, we're seeing it all over again because now we have vaping and we have, we have vaping and we have flavored vaping. And so now we're in another era where tobacco manufacturers have sort of pivoted and try to sort of now influence the use differently, which is creating other health risks to the community and instituting policies now to protect our younger population who are really being targeted at a significant rate.
Do your peers, say in New York and Bridgeport and Chicago, do you have a way to kind of get together, share, commune, cry on each other's shoulders, but also come up with new strategies and ideas?
Yeah, so we have two major associations. We have the National Association of City and County Officials, so which I'm a member of, and our Connecticut chapter is the Connecticut Associations of Directors of Health. And so we often convene at the state level. I'm actually the secretary of the Connecticut Association of Directors of Health, and we often meet to discuss this very thing, or we will collectively issue recommendations to the governor's office or the Department of Public Health on policy changes. We have a team of 6 health directors that actually often advise the Department of Public Health on things that we're seeing as a combination of urban and rural health directors so that we can make sure that all of the different populations are being represented. And so we do collectively sometimes we do complain but because we're exhausted and it's been 18 months, but we also advocate for the public on different levels for the state so that we can be able to urge the state to consider certain recommendations.
Just, Maritza, hold on to that thought. Fast forward, if you could, if we could change the hands of time, if you could go back, knowing what you know now, you could go back 12 months, what would we do differently? And this is not to kind of castigate or criticize problems that occurred before, because if folks just realize how chaotic this has been. I mean, no one expected this to happen 2 years ago, and it's a blessing, a godsend to get the vaccine. But if you could go back 12 months ago or so, what do you think you would do that could be more of an infrastructure initiative, that could make the glide path a little smoother, that could
That's a really good question. And we talk about that often. So I'm going to go back, I'm going to take a step further. I'm going to go back 18 months because before the start of the pandemic. And, one of the things that it's important, we were anticipating a public health response. We were anticipating, and by we, I mean, at the globally and federally, they were anticipating a public health emergency because we were at that 100-year mark. And so to your point earlier, there is some anticipation that there is some threat to society around certain diseases, infectious disease. It is anticipated. I don't think anyone knew to what magnitude. So if I can go back almost 2 years, I would have, and I was not in New Haven, but I was certainly in Bridgeport. I think we would have made sure we placed closer attention to proper inventory. One of the things we did not have in place were enough masks. We had, I'm just going to be frank and honest. There was some certain things that were expired. So it's really paying closely attention to public health emergency preparedness. Are we really prepared if we need to activate tomorrow? And really instituting a more frequent approach to assessing the inventory that was in place when we had to activate, because we did not have those resources in place. And I think what's going to be really critical, and that's why we're working on a report now, and because we want to make sure that the local health response is highlighted, because what we know is that over the few decades, policymakers, not intentionally, were de-investing in public health. And they were, what's the saying? Because, I'm Puerto Rican, so I got to be, it's paying Peter to stealing from Peter to pay Paul, or whatever the idiom is, or it can be vice versa. It's vital that we are investing in public health, because we had to scramble with limited resources and limited staff to respond to a pandemic at this scale. We cannot defund public health. We need to fund public health, and we need to remember, just like we remember 9/11, and we can never forget that day. We can never forget when March of 2020, we had to activate public health officials.
Indeed.
I'm gonna start preaching. No, I'm just kidding.
Well, it's interesting, and I love when you mention the word calling, because I've been chatting with friends about their what the paths they've been leading and the life they've been leading, and what kind of pivotal moments they can maybe reflect upon that kind of gave them a clearer orientation about how they wanted to invest their time and their energy and their interest. And I was talking to my dental hygienist yesterday, actually, and she mentioned that she went to Gateway Community College, and her mother said, why don't you take this course on dental hygiene? But because prior to that time, she was a waitress, and she took the course, and she said, this feels right to me. I'm always interested in how people embark upon
their journey, right? And I think for me, it was my neighborhood. My dad owned a house in Fairhaven, and we were, as I mentioned, I was 8 when we moved from Brooklyn, New York, and my dad and my grandmother raised me. And one of the things that I saw and I witnessed is our neighborhood shifted and changed. It was overcome by a gang. Our street corner, the corner of my house, became a spot where drugs were being sold. And you saw this shift of violence. You saw this shift of illness. You saw this shift of addiction. And just seeing that community, and I knew I did not want to go into being a clinician. Like I was like, I didn't like the blood. And then I took this introduction to public health with, at the time, the New Haven Health Director, Bill Quinn. And it's funny how the universe works, right? Because Bill Quinn and his wife had a nonprofit to give meals to individuals that were living with AIDS and were not mobile enough to have access to healthy meals. So I volunteered for a year in college to give meals to those affected by AIDS. And that's how I declared my major into public health. And then fast forward almost 20 years later, the pandemic has also heightened, and it's almost like it brought all these things to the surface. So all these social issues, and having to I literally had to help develop protocols for every single sector. And we were at a time where elections were happening. People didn't have access to voting. Small businesses were not thriving, and having to help set sector rules and help make sure that people had access to voting and making sure that it was safe and sanitations and pens were being cleaned, little things like that. It's just like, wow, it's just insane how I ended up touching almost every single sector in this pandemic and being able to see some of the issues that we're seeing today.
And the intersectionality, as you mentioned, is just so profound, and that we are all connected. Let's, in the last 15 or so minutes, talk to the business owners. You want them to thrive, but you also want them to do what?
So, I love small business owners. In fact, I live in New Haven, and when I'm devoted to my city that I live in, I also support small businesses, because I feel it's important for small businesses to be supported, because they are part of our economy, right? And we also want to be able to ensure that they thrive. And so for small businesses, one of the things that we did is as there were so many different changes, I partnered with the Small Minority Business Office, Kathy Graves, where we put together presentations on how to safely reopen. What does this new platform look like for small businesses? And so I wanted to make sure that businesses had the tools and resources to be able to safely reopen. I assisted many of the businesses locally to have protocols in place. I provided posters, and the majority of the businesses are thriving and doing well. I mean, there's some struggles, right? Because right now, between the federal laws, state laws, and local laws, some people, the workforce has weakened. We have many people out of work. I'm not returning to work yet.
Mhm.
And so we need to really look at that, the different systems and how that plays a role in small businesses. But then you also have some small businesses that are electing to just focus on the revenue and are not practicing safe measures. And then that's when, you know, we work through the sanitarians to help support those businesses sort of understand that it will impact you if you don't have a healthy workforce, if you don't have healthy employees, healthy customers.
That's
It can
right.
hurt it can ultimately hurt you. And so oftentimes when we leave the education phase, the regulatory piece has to activate. That's not the best part of my job. I do not like to play that role. And if I'm out and about at local businesses, it's oftentimes that there's a problem. And so I don't like to activate. What I like to do is we send our community health workers out in our sanitarian first, and then our sanitarians, and then or we activate the task force. And when that happens, oftentimes that activates me. And I do not like to do that. But we all know I have a reputation across Connecticut. I will come for a business if I have to. And it's not because of the business, it's because we've already tried every angle to try to ensure that we are protecting the public ultimately.
Well, as you know, Teddy Roosevelt had the comment, walk softly but carry a big stick. So, I mean, just that the tough love, the soft love, but it's love that you're demonstrating, and you're trying to just communicate it in the way that a person will hear it. And it's love for that person, and love for their family and their business and their customers. So
Absolutely. Because at the end of the day, it starts with the community and ends with the community. We're all in this together.
Let's give a little shout out to your staff, and I say that because almost every show
Yes.
when I speak with someone, it's important for people to know that there's a there's a structure behind you that's keeping you protected.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Listen, I am not doing this alone. I have an entire team, and I actually thank you for giving me the platform to thank them, because I do try to thank them all the time. Thank you to the New Haven Health Department team. I want to thank all the different city departments, because we came together in a unified manner to really be able to ensure that policies are in place, and having unified command meetings. We are very structured with everything we do because all these different departments all play a role. And so I want to thank the mayor for allowing me to lead the city through this pandemic. It hasn't been easy, but definitely shout out to my team personally, who have been working around the clock and being patient with me as I'm always thinking of new ways to protect the public, and having to change structures all the time, and being patient for and being supportive of the vision that I have for the city.
And just when you mentioned new ways and being innovative and creative, and that's the kind of thing I was thinking about in our earlier discussions, that you're an entity. I read a lot of business journals and Fortune and Forbes and Fast Company, et cetera, but nonprofits and governments also have to be nimble and quick and innovative. So there's going to be new things that you're going to have to do. People may be wearing watches or getting health monitoring information, but there's new things that are going to be happening, I think, as we try to survive and before civilization gets destroyed, that the public health might be monitoring, implementing, encouraging, and or enforcing in terms of our basic human behavior.
Yes. Oh, I love that. It's human behavior, and human behavior impacts health behaviors. And so it's important to also have evidence-based initiatives, right? So like, it's not just trying to create programs or initiatives or being innovative that's going to flop. Is how do we do it in a way that we can evaluate the effectiveness? Yeah. And so, we have been featured, we as a city health department have been featured in so many different journals, because when there was no contact tracing, and contact tracing is basically calling someone that's positive and calling those that have been exposed to the positive and trying to isolate the positive and quarantine exposures. We were the first city to have an infrastructure in place, and we could not have done that without hundreds of volunteers, of many different Yale students that are in our backyard, our medical students, our nursing students, our public health students, and physician assistant students. They all helped shape this contact tracing effort, and we were able to build an infrastructure before the state was able to build it at the time, because we were running against the clock, right? So early on in this pandemic, and once the state instituted that, of course, I support the state 120%, and we aligned ourselves with their system. But initially, we had to build an infrastructure that did not exist. And that work has been recognized in so many different national journals. And I want to thank also our volunteers. We have Medical Reserve Corps volunteers that also have stepped up throughout this pandemic. Community management teams have stepped up and supported us. Alders have supported us. You know, again, and so many different URUs, CARES, so many different, our community health centers, our hospitals, even Griffin Hospital is in our city supporting, right? Business owners like the grocery stores that just allowed me to dance salsa at Seatown in Fairhaven a few weeks ago. You know, yes, because I will bring music wherever I go if I can. And because we want to be able to connect with the cultures, right? We want to be able to be linguistic and culturally appropriate to who we're targeting, because if we're not able to relate, we're not able to make a difference and connect to the people. But it's all of those partners that have helped us achieve the rate that we're in. So I have to also say, and it's not official yet, but I'm going to be talking about it on Tuesday at a press conference. The city of New Haven is at 70% of at least one dose of age-eligible residents, and fully vaccinated are 63.7% for just the city of New Haven. So I really want to commend the community for stepping up and getting yourselves protected and getting vaccinated. So thank you to the community for what you do, because ultimately we cannot get to herd immunity until we can get a shot in every arm.
And Maritza, congratulations. We'll look forward to the Tuesday event. And I must say that I was involved with Gateway Community College for 2 years in terms of a course for public speaking and corporate communication. So I've watched your nimbleness with the media, and that's so key. That's so. Let me use a different word other than nimbleness. Mayor Elliker is superb in terms of setting the stage. But when there's a press conference and he needs to lean on you for specific data and evidence, you step up and you give it cogently and concisely, and that's a true gift, and it comes through. So I guess I want to publicly say that. So that's the flat. That's the compliment. Let me go with a little bit more the criticism moving forward. What do you say to folks about, do I need to get a second shot? If a vaccine is approved for a 5 and 6-year-old, should I be concerned? You know, there are things still down the pike that can still create division and disharmony. And sometimes people are getting fatigued, and sometimes maybe a lot of times. So there's still some not necessarily struggles, but opportunities for cohesiveness, that challenges that remain in front of us, not to mention the flu season coming.
No, you know, you raised a good point. There is pandemic fatigue. And listen, it's pandemic fatigue with us as public health officials. We have it also. And, you know, one of the things that I always say my little tagline is, we are over COVID, but COVID is not over us. And until we eradicate this and get to herd immunity, and really it needs to be a global response. And, I'm always challenging that this needs to be a federal partnership with the World Health Organization, because the virus continues to mutate. What happens with this virus is trying to continue to maintain its momentum, its strength. And so it continues to replicate itself. And so when we have states like, I'm not going to mention the states, but we have certain states that are refusing to even support vaccination efforts, let alone mass efforts, and seeing how so many children are now in ICUs in 2 particular states in our country, we are going to continue to see the need for us to potentially get booster doses as we are now. Pfizer is FDA approved. One of the concerns that the public had is this FDA approved? Is this endorsed by the Pediatric National Association? And the answer is yes. Why was this vaccine developed so quickly? Believe it or not, the COVID-19 SARS-V2 is not a new, it was a new version, but coronavirus in general was not new. So scientists were already in the labs trying to figure out a way that we can protect the community from the coronavirus, right? So we already had thankfully in the United States, we had a baseline infrastructure and a lot of scientists that decided they were going to volunteer to help get us to where we are today. And so what we have done and you can find it on the health department website, is that we have provided fact sheets so that you can be able to have information that's easily understood, and where you can, and we always cite our sources so that you can be able to then reference it, because you don't have to believe my word for it. I want you to be able, and challenge you with anything in life, is that we want to do our research, but get your research where it's scientifically based, and not be misinformed. And so, yes, we will continue to have to get booster doses until we eradicate this on a global level, because now we have many mutated viruses. Delta was not a thing. The variant of Delta was not a thing in the United States. And what happened? It came to us. And so we have to be mindful and always monitoring what's happening at the global level, because it can happen to us at the United States.
I guess as you were talking, Maritza, my mind went to one of the, down on the Long Wharf with the food trucks, and you're there having fun, but also just educating and passing out flyers and
and vaccines.
And vaccines.
Saturday and Sunday. We're right at the Central. We're right there every Saturday and Sunday.
Tonight at the Wilbur Cross and Xavier football game, should everyone in the stands have on a mask?
So outdoor mask is not being mandated, but what I encourage residents to do, if you're going to not be with your immediate household and you are in close proximity with others, you should wear your mask. You should be carrying it anyway, because there's a mandate in our city. So you should have your mask with you. But our athletic director, and shout out to Eric, you are amazing. He always, before he institute a policy, he's always calling me on the phone and having me review them and approve them. So we work really well together. He is encouraging, and there are signs encouraging our guests and our residents to highly recommended to wear masks. And so it is recommended when you enter.
And I hope
signs will be posted.
Yeah, I guess I hope people kind of understand that. And because when I see some of the football games, when people in the stands, close proximity, you may have a few family members, but you don't have 100,000 family members. And so there are other people in the stands right sitting right beside you that aren't.
So the first thing is that we are limiting capacity. So we're not going to be allowing people at full capacity. So we did institute that rule in the city of New Haven. So spectators are very limited with capacity size. And so don't quote me on the number, because I forgot what I approved, but it's definitely around the 50% range. We are also if you're going to be less than 6 feet from someone that's not part of your immediate household, you should mask up and protect yourselves.
Indeed. And I hope people hear this. This is not trying to be an aggressor, or just to make your life miserable. That me?
Yeah, that's you.
Okay. That might be President Biden calling. He may want to kind
right? Take the call and tell him to do global response.
I'm going to ask, everyone should know this is not a rehearsed show, so you just kind of bear with me, Maritza.
No, we're live. It's all good.
but when I'm thinking of you, I always like to ask a question when I speak to someone that's really managing a business. I mean, you're managing an organization, a city organization, but I'd like people to understand that it's also a business. But let me get to the point. In terms of leadership styles, I'm not going to ask you to contrast Elliker's leadership style versus Joe Ganem's leadership style, but I am going to ask you, when someone asks you about leadership style, what comes to your mind? Because again, it depends on the organization and the product and the service. But in general, as you observe leaders, and you are in a leadership position, what does leadership style mean?
So that's such a great question. I lead a department of 120 plus employees within 9 divisions. And so, and I had a responsibility of about 11 departments in Bridgeport. And I think for me during this pandemic, especially, the leadership that Justin Elliker demonstrated was one that I will forever be grateful. He was very inclusive. He stayed leveled when others wanted to not be leveled. So, there was a lot of stress and tension and a lot of fast moving parts that required a quick decision making. And what I admired about his leadership in particular because he needed to lead us as department heads, is he really remained leveled the entire pandemic. I mean, the entire pandemic. And he yields on those expertise when he needs to yield to them, and leads when he needs to lead. And I love that he asks a lot of questions. I would rather have a leader that is calling to get clarification, to really understand an issue, than to go off and to speak on a topic that are not within his expertise. So I do appreciate that his leadership style is, he knew when to lead us as department heads, but he knew when to activate the leaders that needed to within this pandemic, whether it was public safety or the fire department or health.
And
or even economic development.
Right. And how about our good buddy Joe in Bridgeport?
You know, his leadership style was definitely different. He's more of a seasoned mayor, so he sort of like department has sort of, and I didn't get to work with him through a pandemic. So with all fairness, I did not get a chance to work with him through a pandemic. I was already gone. I was already here in New Haven. But at the time when I was the leader, he did give me the autonomy to lead without question. And he would only call me if there was an issue I needed to address. And they were far in between. He always, so I really did appreciate that leadership style from him as well. So they were two very different leaders. He had led already, they used to call him Ganem 1 and Ganem 2 because he was a mayor. He was doing a second term of being a mayor. Right. And so it was really different. And I worked more closely with the CAO, the Chief Administrative Officer at the time, Kimberly Staley. Shout out to Kimberly Staley if she ever gets to hear this. She's an amazing leader. She has now gone on to lead a nonprofit as a CFO, a Chief Administrative Officer for a nonprofit in Hartford. So it was more working closely with other department heads, and the CAO was my direct report. But definitely enjoyed working and loved that community. Bridgeport, has a special place in my heart as well, because I committed to living in Bridgeport while I was there, and it was not a requirement, but I need to always have a pulse of the community. Yes. So I made a commitment to move there because I needed to know what the pulse of the community is, and the same for New Haven. I was so happy to be able to be back in my hometown, where my true inspiration of public health started.
Indeed. We have about 2 minutes, and I want to kind of pivot a little bit to perhaps lead up to another show, because I don't want to put words in your mouth, but it seems to me that you indicated earlier on that violence is a public health issue. Violence affects public health. So maybe let's conclude on that a little bit, because I want people to say, well, Tom, you were talking about COVID and vaccinations. Now, why do you want to talk about violence? But I think our human behavior, we have to understand that we're perhaps a strange species, but it seems to me you have some really thoughts about violence being a public health issue.
Yeah, it was an issue when I was the health director and health and social services director, actually. I had a slightly different title in Bridgeport. I was in charge of the additional departments than I am here. And violence was an issue at that time. And there's an opportunity for us to look at when we prevent the violence from happening. Violence is an outcome of many inherited issues. It just doesn't spur up because we just want violence to happen. There are so many different determinants of issues happening that lead up to that violence. Yeah. So when we have infrastructures that are broken, we need to figure out, how do we prevent those structures so that we can have a healthier society and reduce ultimately violence in our city, substance abuse to the level that violence and substance abuse are at an all-time high that has not been especially in our city in New Haven. We have not seen violence at this level since I think the 90s, right? When I was living here. And so to see this exacerbated to this level, we have to get to the core issues. Where are our systems broken so that we can repair and build a foundation so that we can reduce the violence that is causing these individuals to where it is. And then also when individuals are being released from prison and are going into reentry, right? And they're going into society, making sure that they have the proper tools and resources to be able to engage back into society and not just being dumped into our society without the proper resources. So I am so honored to be working with Dr. Dalal on how do we work together. And one of the things that I want to wrap up with, and we can lead up to a maybe perhaps having Dr. Delau and I at a future interview, is
Sure.
I want to be able to provide technical data and technical support and work closely with PD so that we can then work with those that have services that can diffuse and reduce the crime in our city.
Indeed, indeed. That music means that we'll have to do the next show with you and Dr. Delau, and I might see you this weekend, or I might see you soon. Say shout out to your son, etc.
Yes, thank you for having me.
Thank you so much.
Take care.
Hi, this is New Haven Health Director Maritza Bond. Do you want your life back? Get vaccinated. I did. Got questions about the vaccines? Did you know that there's a place you can go and get the answers and the facts about the vax? Check it out, then you decide. New Haven, get the facts. It's free and it's your choice. To get the facts, or to find a vaccination center near you, visit covid19.newhavenct.gov. Again, covid19.newhaven.ct